Very, very, very pleased with that news.
Fantastic. I understand you have a special guest tonight.
Yes, Imhotep. Okay. Let me tell you, I have to be very quick because we don't have much time.
Mm-hmm.
But Imhotep, my guest is acclaimed as the last honest film critic in the entire United States.
Uh-oh.
Yes, he is. Now, we first met, most of us really first encountered him when he was the arts editor of the City Sun. You know, he wrote those provocative pieces on culture.
Yes.
Armond White is no Johnny-come-lately on the Minneapolis experience and the music industry and cultural journalism. He now has a book called New Position, The Prince Chronicles. And we're going to hear a little bit about it because it is so much it's a lot of information in a very small package. But in the book, he retraces the sexually diverse music movement of the artist, his rock, his funk, his blues, his rock and roll excursions, and he makes comparisons to Michael Jackson, Little Richard, George Clinton, Sam Cooke, James Brown, Marvin Gaye, even Jimi Hendrix, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and the Beatles. So we want to, I hope we can get a lot in this evening. I just want to welcome Armond White. Good evening, Armond.
Hey, Yvette.
It's okay. You could call me Yvette.
I'm sorry. I know your name is Vanette. Just forgive me. I'm sorry about that.
No
Vanette and Imhotep, I'm happy to talk to you guys again.
Armond, good to have you with us tonight. Wow. Let's make sure, Vanette, that we put the title out first before Armond, rolls us through it as well.
Yes, it's called New Position, The Prince Chronicles.
Got it.
Imhotep, the first thing he delved into was Purple Rain. You know, he called it Purple R-A-I-N or Purple R-E-I-G-N. And the first thing I want him to do is do you have your book in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Can you read from page 11, The New Sound of Music, that first paragraph there?
Okay, page 11.
Yes.
Okay, what part? First paragraph?
The first paragraph.
Okay. Anyone who fears the movie musical has died, along with the Western, has not seen Purple Rain. The film debut of the pop singer-songwriter Prince has already set records as the most commercially successful rock and roll-themed movie in history. When Purple Rain premiered last summer, it instantly became Variety's top-grossing film. At the same time, the soundtrack album took the #1 spots on Billboard's album and singles chart. It was the first indication since Saturday Night Fever that music audiences and movie audiences could be entertained as one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you wrote that when?
I wrote that back in 1984.
Goodness gracious.
That was, in fact, one of the first articles that I wrote for the City Sun, which I'm happy that you mentioned, Vanette, because the City Sun is part of my history and part of the history of all black New Yorkers.
Part of mine, too.
Absolutely.
It was a black-owned newspaper that was fearless and had standards, and I was fortunate to be a part of it, and I remember it fondly, as many black New Yorkers do, because we were able to address the black culture in a serious way and respect black artists. And this book that I've written about Prince comes from the City Sun, and in it I try to continue the kinds of black artistic and political celebrations that the City Sun was about. And I wanted to remind people that in the year that Prince died, so that we appreciate him as a great artist and also as an artist who was really, really influential in indicating how black people could think and grow, be themselves, how black art could change the world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Now, Imhotep, Armond also wrote about a book called The Michael Jackson Chronicles.
That I remember. Absolutely.
And there is a parallel to this because he in his book, he mentions that both Michael and Prince, Michael was a Jehovah's Witness and Prince was a Seventh-day Adventist.
Yep.
But Prince became a Jehovah's Witness later, Armond?
Yes, later in his life.
And what's so special about those two Christian beliefs?
Well, what's special about those religions and those particular artists finding succor, finding relief and satisfaction and security in religion, is that it indicates to us all, that the turmoils we face in the world should not bring us down. That in the words of Adam Clayton Powell, we should always keep the faith. And Michael Jackson and Prince found ways to do that through their different religious pursuits. The denominations might be different, but they were all God-fearing, God-believing men, and they were both God-fearing, God-believing men, and they also spread their belief in love and in the best that humanity can be through their music and through all of their art, be it film, music videos, and that's one of the things that makes them special. That's one of the ideas that I was interested in illuminating in this book, to let people know that Prince, just like Michael Jackson in my book Keep Moving, didn't simply make music that you could dance to, though they certainly did that, but they made music that expressed their beliefs, and expressed their beliefs in ways that we could recognize and possibly get some inspiration from.
But it's also ironic that those two denominations have a lot of similarities.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they do, and most particularly in the way that in the what I would call the individuality of them. People know about the Baptist religion and the Catholic religion, and those tend to be what people sometimes use the term the great religions that everybody knows about. Jehovah's Witnesses and the Seventh-day Adventists are kind of more obscure religions, but that doesn't mean that they have a lack of faith, or that the people who practice them and pursue them don't know what's going on in the world and how to overcome the problems in the world. And it's interesting that these black artists pursue those other religions other than Baptist and Catholicism, and that's something I think that's fascinating about them, and that we can, as I said, take some inspiration from. And I think it's worth remembering that both Prince and Michael Jackson were religious, moral people, in addition to being great pop artists, great soul artists, great R&B artists.
Now, throughout the book, Armond goes to different albums and different songs. I had no idea that it was Antoine Fuqua who directed that. He just directed the Magnificent Seventh movie, but I didn't know he also directed Prince's Most Beautiful Girl in the World.
Most Beautiful Girl in the World.
Yeah.
I was happy to write about that, and it's funny. It's funny to take a long view of pop culture history and see what's been in the African American cultural past. People think of Antoine Fuqua as the director of big Hollywood spectacles like The Magnificent Seven and action movies like Training Day, but he started way back in the 1990s as a music video director. Another thing that I was happy to write about in the book is how Prince, in addition to being a great musician, he also, like Michael Jackson, he was an innovator in the music video field and also in the cinematic field. And in hiring Antoine Fuqua to direct his music video for The Most Beautiful Girl in the World, Prince was doing the kind of thing that Michael Jackson did. Mm-hmm. They were creating their own visual art form outside the Hollywood mainstream.
That's right.
This is beautiful and important to know.
That it is. And also, something I didn't know was that the Black Album was sort of in response to the Beatles' White Album.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. Well, Prince came from Minneapolis, but he was an African American, and being an African American, you both, I'm sure, are familiar with the term that we as black people know more about white culture than white people know about our culture.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
So growing up in Minneapolis, Prince knew the expanse of popular music, which includes the Beatles. He knew a lot about the Beatles, and which means he also understood their importance in the history of rock and roll and popular music. And that was one of the things that Prince decided himself would be a part of. That he would be a part of the rock and roll movement, and that he could be a pop artist on the same level as the Beatles. So when the Beatles made their famous White Album in 1968, and it was called the White Album simply not really for racial reasons, but because the cover was simply a blank white cover, and so it got the title the White Album.
Yes.
But when Prince made his Black Album, he sort of followed that example. But Prince also very, very daringly and proudly wanted to emphasize the idea of blackness. Mm-hmm. And when the Black Album came out in 1980, late 87, 80, or early 88, it was probably the funkiest album he had made up to that point. Mm-hmm. It was like Prince finally decided to come out and really embrace funk and soul music in a way that he hadn't before. A very significant movement in his part in terms of his career.
The two of them also
enlighten us a little bit about the Batman alliance with Prince.
I got it.
Oh, okay. Going through the 80s and 90s with Prince, well, the late 70s, 80s, and 90s with Prince was quite an adventure, because he started out as a young musician, a young artist who did most of the music himself. But throughout those decades, his progress was a progress through R&B music and through the different musical genres, but then also through different art forms. Like I said, like music video, like movies, and one of the most significant movie events that Prince was a part of after the success of Purple Rain in 1984 was that he did an album, a soundtrack album for the movie Batman.
Right.
This is a different Batman, the 1989 Batman directed by Tim Burton. It was a Warner Brothers film, and Prince was signed to the Warner Brothers label, so it was convenient for the label to have one of their top musical artists do an album that was a tie-in to that movie. But Prince did something amazing with his Batman album. He sort of remade the story of that movie, but remade it in his own terms, and began to and through the figure of Batman and the villain of the story of the Joker, Prince made an album of songs that were about his own sexual concerns, his racial identity concerns, and his political concerns. People don't talk much about the Batman album anymore, but it was a big hit when it came out, and I guarantee you, if you go back to the Batman album today, you'll be fascinated by it, by the things Prince spoke about, sang about, and wrote about concerning racial identity and social position. It's an amazing album. It's not just based on a comic book. It's based on the things Prince knew about life.
Interesting. Armond, I want to just squeeze this in here. The two of them, Prince and Michael, also took very important stances in the business of music as well.
Oh, yeah. Yes. They were great. They were great businessmen, too. Recently there was a music video that was a new music video that was put on the internet by a European choreographer who did his tribute to Michael Jackson on his birthday about based on the song Black or White. And some people have complained about that, complaining that it wasn't as good as Michael Jackson's. And my response was, no, it's not as good as Michael Jackson's, but it's still pretty good. And another complaint was that it was just done to make money, to cash in. And I thought, well, there's a certain reality we have to face about pop culture, and that it's a commercial. It's a commercial venture. It's always a commercial venture. And never forget that Michael Jackson and Prince made sure they got paid.
For sure.
They were great artists, but they weren't fools. They knew how to run their business. And I touch on that in the book as well, because it's part of what made them smart. It's part of what made them admirable figures.
Wow. Well, I'm looking at the clock, and we have to go. But in the book, Armond also makes references to H. Rap Brown, Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, Miles Davis, Public Enemy, De La Soul, Malcolm X, and the Black Lives Matter movement. It's a good read. And Armond White he constantly refers to Prince as the artist. What do you call the artist permanently known as Prince?
The artist permanently known as
permanently known as Prince.
Yeah.
There's that period where he went by a symbol rather than a name, but he will always be known as Prince, and that's an honorable thing.
Wow. Armond, congratulations. I'm excited to get it for sure. New position, the Prince Chronicles.
Please get it. It's available on Amazon, and I hope everybody reads it and get something from it.
Giving thanks. I know we will.
Thank you
again.
Thank you both.
Wow.
Okay.
Thank you, V. That's a powerful piece. I want to grab mine right away.
I mean, there's so much more compelling stuff that we could touch on if we have more time. But it's what we went through is just a little taste, but excellent book.
Absolute. Give thanks. And that brother's always in the case. And this sounds like a real serious adjunct to the Michael Jackson Chronicles. The two together definitely can raise consciousness.
He wrote a book about Tupac.
Tupac as well. That's right. Exactly. Whose birthday just came through. That's right. Exactly. Thank you, V. Appreciate you as always.
Anytime, Imhotep.
All right, Imhotep Gary Bird's Radio GBE is created, hosted, and executive produced by yours truly, Imhotep. Produced by Miss Nairi Shannon, also our GBE Facebook curator and manager. Mixed mastered by in-studio engineer, Mr. Reggie Johnson. Thanks to all of our guests, and most of all, thanks to you for listening. Remember, of course, that the key to tomorrow is what we do today, the decision to work or whether to play. Both have their place in the human life stream. Only one will achieve your dream. Life is the ultimate trip once you learn to experience it.